Hello, welcome to another topic under the chapter 5 of our lesson entitled The Juvenile Delinquency. So as we go along with our lesson, you the students are able to define delinquency in general, define juvenile delinquents or juvenile delinquency, and the laws related to juvenile delinquency and the factors underlying juvenile delinquency. So let's start first with the family background. So how is family background or how is family background influence the behavior of a child or a delinquent child? Diba? So let's start with the home. So the family or the home is one of the most influential environment factor that would lead a person to either become citizen, law-abiding, or a criminal. So it's the home where our values in life, our behavior are learned, are being corrected, are being punished if we did wrong. It's the behavior of it's the behavior of your parents that you have learned or that you have observed or that you have acquired that influences your behavior as you grow or as you go or as you grow. Diba? So if the child or if the parents of the child are separated or the child observes that his parents are, let's say for example, drug users. So that observed behavior or that observed nga gibuhat sa parents, that will influence the child when he grows up. Okay? Or if the child is neglected or if the child he doesn't feel the love and warmth of his parents, so the child, when he grows up, he tends to be attention seeker, for example. So it's in the family or in the home where our behavior, our values, that will determine us if we are going to be a law-abiding citizen, a criminal, or a delinquent. Okay? So, the home also is considered the cradle of human personality. For in it, the child forms fundamental attitudes and habits that endure throughout his life. So, cradle, you say cradle, the beginning, so it's the fundamental the fundamental attitudes and habits that we may be or that we endure in our as we grow. So it begins in our home. Okay? Next, the parents are the most influential persons in the family when they give love, attention, guidance, security, and standards, and all other things that a child needs. Especially if you are a child, or a child should be given emotional needs. Now, what are the emotional needs? For example, warmth, love, attention. Attention not to the point that the child cannot do or cannot judge what is right from wrong. Ingana ba? So, the parents are the most influential persons. So, kung unsay kinaiya ni bata, it's either nakuha na siya kinaiya sa iyang parents, sa iyang neighborhood, sa iyang silingan, ingana. So, the home, it's where the cradle of human personality begins. So, the effects of pathological social relations in the home are to a great extent influence of antisocial behavior. Okay? So, as my example, ganiha nga, if the child observes or witness his parents to that kanang nagshabu, for example, they're taking drugs, they're selling drugs. So, kanang bataan, naka-instill na sa iyang mind that selling drugs, that using drugs is not prohibited. Kaya mo may nakita niya sa ihang mga ginikanan. Diba? So that the behavior of the parents or the behavior of the people around the child may influence his behavior also. Diba? Next, after we learned about the factors of or in the home, let's go with kanang broken home. Yun na to nga broken families. There are certain questions that if you are or if you came from a broken family, if you came from a separated parents, the child tends to be delinquent. So that question or the answer of that question is depends or it depends. Depende na siya sa situation. Okay? So let's discuss about the broken home. So the broken home suggests separation between parents, including the lack of interest of parents on the welfare of the children. So if the parent or both of your parents are separated and kung asa man ka na dong, that parent or whether your mother or your father lacks the interest of or lacks interest in you, so diba that also affects your behavior or that affects your personality. So many delinquent children come from the broken home, if not a problematic environment in the home. So if the child or the children who came from a broken home, if dili man gani siya mahimong delinquent, it's also on the factors of the environment. Ang ihang environment ba kung asa siya kapuyo, whether his environment is surrounded with gangs, for example, or is surrounded with pushers nga ang shabu sa ilaha is common na nga makita. So that also influences the behavior of the child. So many delinquents are ill-advised by irresponsible parents out of the pride and alleged marital incompatibility because more often, delinquent parents are muddled with drunkenness, economic difficulties, and ineffective household management. So hence, broken home could trigger the problems in juvenile delinquency and criminality. So one of the contributing factors of juvenile delinquency is the broken home. So it was attested that a broken home triggers a child or triggers the problem in juvenile delinquency that somehow lead to criminality. Okay? So let's go with, after we know the family background, let us know the broader social process or the circle outside from our home. So who are the factors or what are the factors that circles the child that also affects his behavior? So first, we will talk about the bad neighborhood. So this refers to areas of places in which dwelling or housing conditions are dilapidated, unsanitary, and unhealthy, which are detrimental to the moral, health, and safety of the population. So, bad neighborhood. Diba? Mostly, nabito tayo giingon nila nga, most delinquent youths or most kanang mga pickpocketers or mostly nga mga mangawat nga bata is kanang nagpuyo sa mga squatter or nagpuyo sa estero. Nga na. That puyanan is considered a bad neighborhood. That influences the behavior of the child. He came from a bad neighborhood or the bad neighborhood itself again influences the juvenile delinquency of a child or a children or the children. So most inhabitants in a bad neighborhood are experiencing economic difficulties, alcoholism, substance abuse, gambling, and many other problems in life. So that is true, no? If you say a bad neighborhood, it's either they are economically deprived or mostly mga drunkards, mga alcoholic, substance abuse like drugs, gambling, and many other problems in life. Next is bad elements prefer to dwell in such community because they are not welcome in decent places. So that is true also. These bad elements are not welcome to decent places. That's why they formed another group, create their own group, their subculture group to kanang ilahang balaod, ang ilahang or they have their own culture, values. Inga na, if the child grows in a bad neighborhood, the child tends to be delinquent. Okay? Next, after the bad neighborhood, let's go with the school. So, the school is an extension of the home having the strategic position to control crime and delinquency. Diba? When you reach the age of 6 or 7, so you will start elementary years, the junior high school years, senior high school years, or even college. So the school has the strategic position to control crime and delinquency. So most of your time are in the school. So the school also influences your behavior as a child or as a person or as a adolescent or as an adolescent. So the teachers are considered second parents, that is true, having the responsibility to mold the child to become productive members of the community. So the teachers are our second parents, so they mold our, diba, we in the home we have learned the fundamental values, the right from wrong. And so the teacher now portrays the role of the second parents, wherein the teacher also mold the child to become law-abiding citizen. So si teacher daghan og influensya. Buto nang moingon nga kanang ngana si teacher unsay gusto ni unsay ganahan nimo magmudako kaday. Unsay ganahan ni mga trabaho, mayon ko, maestra kay ganahan ko magtan-aw ni teacher. So, 'di ba? The decision of the child influences to the person wherein he usually sees. Kanang kapunay niya makit-an ba? So the child or the teacher helps in molding the child to become a law-abiding citizen or a delinquent. Diba? So the school takes the responsibility of preventing the feeling of insecurity and rejection of the child, which can contribute directly to maladjustment and to criminality by setting up objectives of developing the child into a well-integrated and useful law-abiding citizen. So the school has also the role of working closely with the parents and neighborhood and other community agencies and organization to direct the child in the most effective and constructive way. So, 'di ba? Not just or ang school dili lang kay mga positive ang ilahang gihatag. Sometimes diha sa school pod makaawat ang students or makaawat ang child of bad behavior. Samot na kung naay mga gangs, for example, unya dili i-correct ni teacher, pasagdan ra sa teacher ay ngana. So the school may give positive and negative influence to the behavior of the children. So the school may help the child to become law-abiding citizen, or the school also the influences that a child becomes a juvenile delinquent or the child becomes delinquent. Okay? After the school, we are going to tackle the church. So, unsa man po'y role ni church sa ato ang or sa isa ka child? So religion is a positive force for good in the community and an influence against crime and delinquency. So religion also affects or the positive force for good in the community and an influence against crime and delinquency. So that also na may ubang religion na they are very consistent with attending masses. So nga, di ba? Na ay mga pugos nga simba. So that religion also influences the behavior of the children. Okay? So the church influences people's behavior with the emphasis on moral. So the church is responsible for our moral development. So, and life's highest spiritual values, the worth and dignity of the individual and respect for persons' lives and properties, and generate the full power to appropriate crime and delinquency. So just like the family and the school, the church is also responsible to cooperate with the institutions and the community in dealing with problems of children. So delinquents and criminals regardless of the treatment and correction of criminal offenders. So the church is one of the contributory factors that a child becomes a law-abiding citizen. Samot na if he has instilled while he is young the spiritual values or the moral values that is or that was learned or that is learned from the church. Okay? Next. We have the government and other components of the criminal justice system. So the government and the other components of the criminal justice system are the organized authorities that enforce the laws of the land and the most powerful in the control of people. Respect for the government is influenced by the respect of the people running the government. So of course we are in a democratic government, so the power is in the people. So if the people see a president or the leader of the government that is, say for example, corrupt, so that tends to, since they are the organized authorities to enforce the laws of the land. So if they are the authority unya, makita sa mga tao nga makita sa tao that they are or the government is, say for example, corrupt. So ang mga tao na once nga makita na sila na yung tendency nga di na sila motuo sa gobyerno. That is why na ay kitawag na tuog kanang mga leftist, rebels. So they are the people who doesn't believe in the government or wala na sila nituo sa gobyerno tungod kay wala na sila kasabot. So, 'di ba? The government influences the decision of a certain person or the child, or for example, 'di ba? So bata pa lang, if you are radicalized by the or you are being radicalized with the ideology of the leftist, or for example kana mga rebels, mga rebelde, so 'di ba mawala ang imuhang pagtuo sa gobyerno. So those leftists are considered to be delinquents, or those leftists are considered to be deviant to the society, 'di ba? So the government also influences the decision of the person. Kung wala na sila'y chance nga mutuo pa sa gobyerno, nang wala na sila kasabot ba, nangita sila og another governing body nga makasabot nila or where they are belong, di ba? So when the people see that public officers and employees are the first ones to violate the laws, people will refuse to obey them because they set the bad example and create an atmosphere conducive to crime and disrespect for the law. So, di ba? If the government officials are the first one to violate the laws, so kinsa pa may mutuo nila, di ba? So, if they set the example, so mawala ang respect sa kanang or sa tao nga under sa government. That is why mauto nga naay mga leftist. Okay? Next, the mass media also influences the behavior of the person or the behavior of the child. Sabot na karon that we are already in the 21st century. Also na si Twitter, si Facebook, si Instagram, si Tumblr, unsa pa uban diha. So, that mass media is the best institution for information dissemination, thereby giving the public necessary information to know and to help shape everyday views about crime and its control. But there are also certain limitations, or there are also disadvantages of that mass media. If the mass media is not or more siya gitaken for granted ba, gihimo siya sa sayop nga pamaagi, diba? So if that is the case, then that also influences the behavior of the children. Like for example, kuyaw na kayo ang mga pedophiles karon or kana mga sexual predators. For example, they are going to ask or kana bitang ilahang or through video camera na ang ilahang pag sexual exploit sa children. 'Di ba? So ang bata maghubo sa atubangan sa sexual predator, not knowing that it is already called child pornography tungod sa ka-advance sa technology. O, 'di ba? So that mass media, if that is taken for granted or that is being used in the inappropriate way, so that leads to crime. Okay? So technology is useful, but it should be used in moderation, or it should be used in information dissemination appropriate for the viewers. Or, di ba, na may certain mga information that is filtered. If, for example, you are 18 below or you are 12 years old below, there are certain information that is filtered or that is inappropriate for your age. So, mass media also influences the behavior of a child. Or that mass media influences juvenile delinquents. Diba? Kung unsay makita nila sa mass media, tuo sila nga sakto na, inga na, dili i-correct sa parents, so bata pa lang, inganin na lang nakitaan, and dili na siya i-correct sa parents, so mao na siyang, that child tends to be juvenile delinquent because they know that mo ilang gikapi sa ilang nakita, 'di ba? So ingana ang mass media. So now let's go with the brief history of juvenile delinquency. So mura siya na wala na siya na ego, no? Murag na kuan. So that is brief history of juvenile delinquency. So let's tackle on the history of the juvenile delinquency. So first, because wayward children or wayward youths are common, or kana mga vagrants bitaw, mga youth nga wala na kapuy-an. So mao nang naatay gitawag, or there are certain institutions nga natukod in order to house vagrants or to house wayward youths on the ancient times, or kanang during the panahon sa, for example, panahon sa katong war. For example, so since ancient times, enlightened legal systems have distinguished between juvenile delinquents and adult criminals. So generally, the immature were not considered morally responsible for their behavior. So first, prior to the 20th century, juvenile offenders were often treated as adults. The first development contrary to this in the United Kingdom was the establishment of the Borstal Reformatory Training Center in Norma. So these are the samples of the, or these are the evolution of what we have today, or kanang gitawag na tuog mga non-government institution that is catering for the intervention and diversion programs of the child in conflict of the law. So kanang mga juvenile delinquents, kung dili na siya, kung wala na siya parents nga mubalik niya, so ato na siya isod sa mga non-government organization. So during the late part of 18th and 19th century, courts punished and confined youth in jails and penitentiaries. So since few other options existed, youth of all ages and genders were often indiscriminately confined with hardened adult criminals and the mentally ill in large, overcrowded, and decrepit penal institutions. So many of these youth were confined for non-criminal behavior simply because there were no other options. So during the 18th and 19th century, there has been a rise of wayward youths. So in order to control the street of mga wayward youths, so muna siyang gi-confine siya. And that youths may be a or wala na sila nabuhat or non-criminal behavior, but gi-confine lang na siya para makontrol ang isa ka lugar, siguro ana, or for example. But the penal institution before was kanang wala siya desegregate ba. Kita po siya sa mga adult criminals, gender, male and female, gitapo siya. So nga na, unsa may, kung a child itapo nimo sa adult criminal, the tendency is, imbes kay ang kanang child, dili na siya criminal, or he is only confined because kay wala na laing option, so he tends to become a juvenile delinquent because he is influenced by the adult criminals. So mo bitaw na karon ang gibuhat sa ato ang mga or kanang gibuhat sa government is they are making laws, ratifying laws that is conducive to child development gyapon. Bisan pa og kanang bataan naka-commit og crime, so kuan gyapon na siya. Dili gyapon na siya itapo sa ato ang adult offender. So that is separated to the adult offenders para dili gyapon siya ma-impluwensyahan. So New York House of Refuge in 1825, the first institution designed to house poor, destitute, and vagrant youth who were deemed by authorities to be on the path towards delinquency. So kaning natatag ang House of Refuge. So unsay pasabot og refuge? So they houses youths who are wayward ba or kanang walay gipuy-an, gasuroy-suroy ra. So ilan na siyang in-house. Next, House of Refuge were large fortress-like congregate-style institution located in urban areas for youth designated as abandoned, delinquent, or incorrigible. So the average number of youth in a House of Refuge was 200, but some, like the New York House of Refuge, house over 1,000 youth. So first nga natatag nga institution is the House of Refuge. Okay? Next, let's go with the reform, training, or industrial schools. The emerging public school movement and compulsory education, social reformers began arguing for a new type of institution that placed greater emphasis on education. So through this movement, the reform school, also called training and industrial schools, became an indelible part of the juvenile justice system. So today, reform schools are typically called youth correctional institutions and continue to follow a classic congregate institutional model. The concentrating large number of youth in highly regimented penitentiary-like institutions. So even though that is a penitentiary-like institutions, they are focusing on the reform or the training of the, or kanang gitawag na to, industrial schools. Tungod kay compulsory education was common or compulsory na siya ba So even though that is a penitentiary-like institution, the wayward youths that are being housed there are kanang nag-eskwela, diba? So one of the best examples of a 19th century reform school was the San Francisco Industrial School, which was established in 1859. So after kanang gitawag na tuog mga juvenile schools, we are now into the juvenile court. So again, that they are ratifying laws that conducive to child development. So the 16th century educational reform movement in England that perceived youth to be different from adults with less than fully developed moral and cognitive capacities fueled the movement for juvenile justice reform. So by the middle of the 19th century, following the creation of houses of refuge, new evolutions such as cottage institutions, out-of-home placement, and probation were introduced. These new approaches were typically the result of enterprising social reformers who sought new and better ways to address the problem of wayward youth. So this collection of institutions and programs were finally brought together with the creation of the Juvenile Court. So first established in 1899 in Cook County, Illinois. And then rapidly spread across the country, the Juvenile Court became the unifying entity that led to a juvenile justice system. So, aning sa atua, we have the family court. Kanang they are in charge in prosecuting, in trying laws about children. That is called a family court. So, 'di ba? Separate ang juvenile sa adult offenders. So, that are the reformers of the juvenile justice system that we have today. So, now let us define what is delinquency in general. So, what is kuno delinquency? So, delinquency refers to any action, course of conduct that deviates from acts approved by the majority of people. So, majority of people, so the population. So, a certain action, if that deviates from the norms of the society or the course of conduct that deviates, kanabang murag mo kaliwa or mo dili siya sakto kung unsay normal sa atong palibot, so that is called delinquency. Okay? So it is a description of those acts that do not conform to the accepted rules, norms, and mores of the society. So if that behavior or if that act does not conform to the accepted rules, norms, and mores of the society, that becomes crime, a sin, or an offense, or a felony. Diba? Sa ato ang gidiscuss, daghan mang term sa crime. So we have the sin. Sin siya kung morally. Kung if it's in legal term, so butang na to crime, or kanang gitawag na to og felony, offense, so nga na. So if that act deviates to the rules or it does not conform to the rules, that becomes crime or that becomes delinquency. Okay? So, it is also a general term for any misconduct or misbehavior that is a tantamount to felony of offense. Diba? So, as what I have discussed, felony is referred to the acts that is prohibited against or that is lawful or acts that punishable in revised penal code. So, kung offense, that is special penal law. Diba? So, legally speaking, delinquency means the failure to perform an act required by law or the non-performance of duty or obligation that is mandated by the existing law or rule. So, if that or kanang delinquency, if that again deviates, so that is considered delinquency, or that is considered delinquency. Now, let's go with what is a juvenile delinquent. So, unsa man kanang after we have known the meaning of delinquency. So, ditso na dayon ta sa juvenile delinquent. So, unsa may nadugang sa ato ang juvenile? Juvenile are youth or wala pa na siya. They are below 18 years old. So, juveniles are young people who are regarded as immature or one whose mental as well as emotional faculties are not fully developed, thus making them incapable of taking full responsibility of their actions. So, kana ko ng mga young people who are regarded as immature or one whose mental as well as emotional faculties are not fully developed. So, kanang atong gitawag o kanang mga idiots, mga imbecile. So, that is considered a juvenile because their mind or it was not fully or their mental capacity was not or is not yet fully developed. So, in legal points, juvenile is a person subject to juvenile court proceedings because of statutorily defined event or condition caused by or affecting that person and was alleged to have occurred while his or her age was below the specified age limit. So, mo ko na siya term. So, in view of the above, juvenile delinquents are youthful offenders and have been adjudicated. So, when you say adjudicated, it was already sentenced as such by the court of proper jurisdiction. So, today, child in conflict of the law or child in conflict with the law is the term applied to a child who is alleged. So, manang alleged. Gipasanginlan. When you say accused, giakusahan, or adjudicated, gisentensyaan of having committed an offense under Philippine law. So, RA 9344, so siya gi-amend ang term nga juvenile into child or children in conflict with the law. So, muna na siya term of the applied to a child who is alleged of, or adjudged as having committed an offense under Philippine laws. So, what are the laws relative to juvenile delinquency in the Philippines? So, unsa kunoy o if the child commits a crime, unsay possible nga makaprotekta niya or unsa nga law ang iyang nalapas, diba? So, Presidential Decree number 603 or otherwise known as the Child and Youth Welfare Code of the Philippines. This applies to a person below 18 years of age. So, kanang gitawag na tuog PD 603. So, kana kuno si PD 603, Presidential Decree number 603, otherwise known as the Child and Youth Welfare Code of the Philippines, which took effect 6 months after its approval in December 10, 1074, or kanang gitawag na tuog June 10, 1975, applies to persons below 18 years of age, lowered the age of minority from 21 to 18 years of age, and such persons are referred to as child or minor or youth. So, kani ko nung PD 603, ilang paubos ang age of minority. From 21, gihimo nila nga 18. Okay? Next, we have related provisions of Act 3815 or the Revised Penal Code. So, the provision of Article 189 on the exemption of the liability is the same as Article 12, Paragraph 2 and 3 of the Revised Penal Code. So, the following are exempted from criminal liability. First, persons under 9 years of age, persons over 9 years of age, and under 15, unless he acted with discernment. So, unsa man ang discernment? he is able to distinguish right from wrong. Diba? In which case, he shall be proceeded against in accordance with Article 80 of this code. So now Article 192 of PD 603. So if you are a child under PD 603, you are exempted. So if you commit a criminal act or a criminal liability, if you are under 9 years of age, you are exempted in criminal liability. If you are a person over 9 years of age, so when you say 9 years over, so matoto 10 or 11, and under 15. So yung ana nga age bracket butang ato from 9 to 15 or from 10 to 15 ana nga age bracket. If you acted with this, he acted with discernment, in which case he shall be proceeded against in accordance with Article 80 of the revised penal code of the PD 603. So Article 13 of the revised penal code also states that the following are mitigating circumstances. So that age kanang gitawag na tuog persons under 9 years of age kana nga siya is also a mitigating circumstance sa ato ang revised penal code. So if the child commits a crime and he is ingana nga age, so that can be considered as a mitigating circumstance. So unsa man ang mitigating circumstance? So mo na siya ang makapalower sa penalty nimo. Okay? So when you say mitigating, from the word mitigate, mo lower, mo decrease, unsa pa may uban nga term, basta kay mo obos. Okay? So that the following are the mitigating circumstances. So that the offender is under 18 years of age or over 70 years. In the case of the minor, he shall be proceeded against in accordance with the provisions of Article 80. So, this means that the minor offender who is under 18 is entitled to special privilege mitigating circumstance. Hence, cannot be offset by aggravating circumstance. So, under Article 68 of the revised penal code, a minor who is over 9 but under 15 is entitled to a penalty 2 degrees lower than that provided by law. So, say for example, if you are over 9 but under 15, so if you commit a crime, if you are 11 years old, and you, so pwede ka, penalties na kay entitled to a penalty 2 degrees lower. So, from life imprisonment, so mahimo na lang kang reclusion temporal kay life imprisonment ang pinakataas, so -2, so ibutang na to reclusion perpetua. So ang imuhon na ng penalty is reclusion temporal from 12 years to 20 years. Okay? So while a minor who is over 15 but under 18 is entitled to penalty 1 degree lower than that provided by the law. So kanang atong gitawag na tuog age of minority. Next, what are the laws relative to juvenile delinquency in the Philippines? So, napatay lain. We have Article 13 of the revised penal code. So, muna to katong mitigating circumstance. Next, we have Article 192, suspension of sentence and commitment to youthful offender. So, your sentence was suspended. Instead, you are committed to a youth detention facility. Next, Article 194, the care and maintenance of youthful offender. Article 195, report on the conduct of the child. 196, we have the dismissal of the case. If it is shown to the satisfaction of the court that the youthful offender whose sentence has been suspended has behaved properly and has shown his capability to be a useful member of the community, so the case may be dismiss. So if makita sa korte nga kanang bata after he is committed to a youth detention facility, na prove by any or makita dito that he is showing a useful member of the community even before reaching the age of majority upon the recommendation of the DSWD, shall be dismissed and order his final discharge. So after the child is committed to a youth detention facility, if makita sa court nga ang bata is showing a useful member of the society, so muna siya, ang iyang case will be dismissed, and ang iyang order will be the order of is and the court will order his final discharge. So mubalik na siya sa community. Okay? Next, the return of youthful offender to court. So if committing court the pronouncement of judgment, so that is opposite so sa ato ang dismissal sa ato ang dismissal of the case. So if the child commits a crime while he is under a youth detention facility, so mao na siyang pwede nga ibalik ang youthful offender sa court. Or when he is found to be incorrigible or has willfully failed to comply with the conditions of his rehabilitation program, and when he has reached the age of 21 while in commitment unless his case is dismissed in accordance with Article 196. In the latter case, the convicted youthful offender may apply for probation under provision of PD 968. So in any case, the youthful offender shall be credited in the service of his sentence. So the age of majority is 21. So if the child doesn't show any progress while he is in a detention facility or a youth detention facility, if he reaches the age of majority, which is 21 years old, so pwede na siya ibalik sa korte. But gitagaan gyapon ang child of privilege. He can apply for probation. So probation is a release of the offender sa community adto niya i-serve ang iyahang sentence sa community. Again, when you say probation, imo na siyang i-serve sa community and dapat imo gihapong i-follow ang conditions sa probation. Conditions sa probation, for example, dili ka mudong og mga pasugalan, dili ka mag-inom, dili ka mudong sa mga beer houses, mga bar, may ana. That are the conditions of probation. So, diba? Next, we have the effect of release of child-based and good conduct. So, next, we have the living quarter for youthful offenders, the records of proceedings. So, this records of proceedings, when the youthful offender has been charged and the charges have been ordered dropped, all the records of the case shall be considered privileged and may not be disclosed directly or indirectly to anyone for any purpose whatsoever. So, diba? When you say the recordings of the proceedings, so if for example, if the child has been exploited or sexual exploited, so iya man na siyang inarrate ang iyahang mga experiences, appeal na siya sa court proceeding, inarrate na siya, videohan, gibuhat na siya nga videohan ang bata nga during sa iyang narration para ang bata is to kanang prevent nga ang bata magbalik-balik sa korte nga mosalaysay sa iyahang mga panghitabo. So in order to prevent that trauma, sumo na siyang i-record na siya sa court with the presence of the social worker. Mo na siya videohan. So that video will be presented to the court as evidence. Nga na. So muna ang child dili na siya pabalik-balikon og istorya sa mga panghitabo to prevent further trauma. Okay? Next, civil liability of the youthful offender. So even though you are criminally liable, you are also still civilly liable. So kanang mga civil liability, kanang mubayad ka og fine sa imuhang, say for example, nakakawat ka og inganing kanang mga alahas. Say, imo nang bayran ang imuhang kanang tao nga imong gikawatan og fine. Samot na kung nakonbiktuhan ka, you're going to pay for a fine. Say for example, ang gihatag nga fine sa court is 100,000. That payment of fine of 100,000 pesos is your civil liability to the victim. Okay? Last three, sa ato ang topic, no? Republic Act number 7610 or the Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act that is approved on June 17, 1992. So, muna siya ang bagong provision, DRA 7610. So, is for the protection of the child from becoming a victim of child abuse, exploitation, and discrimination. Next, we have Republic Act number 8369, the Family Courts Act of 1997. So, establishing family courts. Next, we have Republic Act, kanang bag-o karon. Republic Act number 9344. It's the Juvenile and Justice and Welfare Act of 2006, an act establishing a comprehensive juvenile justice and welfare system, creating the Juvenile Justices and Welfare Council. So, kinsa man ang nag-comprise sa ato ang Juvenile Justice and Welfare Council. So, we have the DOJ, the DSWD, nga na. So, or ang pagsaka sa kaso sa isa ka child is under pa na siya sa DILG. So muna siyang naapa sa PNP ba? So muna ang Republic Act 9344, creating the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Council. So muna siya isa sa major premise nganong nasa batas ang Republic Act number 9344. So that ends our discussion on juvenile delinquency. So kindly remember those laws that are related to juvenile delinquency that protects the child from further abuse, exploitation, or any other harms. That also gives the right of the children nga bisan pa og nakakommit sila og crime, they are still protected by the government. So, okay, see you on our next discussion.